going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Kevin Jackwitz. This is the Kaged Review, and this is coming back to my series of X-Men movie reviews. And we are at X-Men The Last Stand. This is the ending of the first trilogy. X-Men, I really believe, started a genre. If it wasn't for the success of X-Men and X2, I don't think you would have what we have today, with the likes of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and now DC trying to catch up. I just don't think we would have had it. And I think that this franchise has a lot to offer. Unfortunately, sometimes it does come out with a major dud. And this here is one of the most hated and reviled movies, not just of the series itself, but of the entire genre. And that says a lot when you have movies like Green Lantern in there. But what most people don't know is that this movie was incredibly rushed. Brett Ratner, the director, came in late. Bryan Singer left to do Superman Returns, which he has openly admitted was a terrible mistake. So there were mitigating circumstances there for being such a disjointed and bad movie at times. But it's one of my favorite bad movies. It really is. It actually has some very good character moments. It has some very good special effect and action moments. And so it actually is fun to watch, I think, for me personally. So you have Hugh Jackman coming back as Logan Wolverine, Patrick Stewart as Charles Xavier, Professor X, Halle Berry as Aurora Monroe Storm. You have Jason Marsden coming back as Scott Summers Cyclops, Anna Paquin coming back as Marie Rogue. You have Famke Janssen as Jean Grey of the Phoenix, Ian McKellen as Eric Lansher, Magneto, Rebecca Romaine as Raven Darkholme, Mystique, Shawn Ashmore as Bobby Drake, Iceman, Aaron Stanford comes back as John Allardyce or Pyro, Kelsey Grammer is introduced as Hank McCoy, Beast, which I thought was an excellent choice. And at first, when I heard Kelsey Grammer was playing Beast, I'm not going to lie, I was like, I don't see it. I don't really think I'm going to like this. And I was dead wrong. Really, truly dead wrong. Ellen Page is brought in as a new version of Kitty Pryde. Vinnie Jones is introduced as the Juggernaut. Daniel Cudmore as Peter Rasputin, Colossus. Ben Foster comes in as Warren Worthington III, or Angel. And Eric Dane as Multiple Man. So many things that I could start out with, but what I really want to focus on first is the actual really great moments at the beginning. You have a Danger Room session, which was fine. There wasn't really anything to, worry about. It was, training session. So it looked very cool. But then when the Danger Room session is over, they were fighting this mock Sentinel. They have a discussion where Logan kind of decided to just take out the Sentinel, and Storm is like, why did you do that? We're trying to train the kids. He's like, I'm just substituting for Scott, who didn't show up. And so Logan goes and finds Scott, and there's this great conversation about them having to get past the death of Jean Grey. And one of the great lines that I've heard a lot of people use in the reviews that I've watched so far is Scott turns around and says, "Not everybody heals as fast as you, Logan." And it really was a great line, and I loved it when I heard that line in the movie originally. I remember that really catching my attention because, you get the awesome healing powers from Logan, but they take that amazing supernatural ability and really bring it to a very personal level with Scott, and I really liked that. I thought it was very, very well done there. And then of course Scott, he's he's hearing Jean call to him, and so he goes to Alkali Lake, and lo and behold, here comes Jean out of the water. He has this moment where he's pissed off, and he kind of takes his eye visor off and just puts a blast out into the water, and then it blows him back, and here's Jean Grey, completely out of control apparently, although we don't know that yet in the movie, and becoming the Phoenix. So a lot of people did not like what they did with Jean Grey, the Phoenix. If you don't know, it deals with like aliens and really a lot of layers of mental stability in the comics. And they kind of barely touch on that in the movie, but not really. And honestly, I think Jean Grey, for being such an integral part of this movie, was not very well developed. And that may be because it was a rushed movie, but they really don't go very deep with Jean Grey and why she becomes the Phoenix, or the Phoenix itself. I mean, they just don't really get into it that much. And that, unfortunately, is true of a lot of characters here. The first two movies balanced out characters very, very well. This one, definitely not. There are characters that you see very briefly throughout the entire movie. Of course, you have your mainstays like Professor X, Magneto, Wolverine that you're going to see throughout. But there's a lot of X-Men that just aren't there. Now, Scott, of course, gets killed right away by Phoenix within the first, 20 minutes of the movie. But you also get like a really quick clip at the beginning of the movie where this kid, he's cutting off the beginnings of what are wings because he doesn't want his dad finding out he's a mutant. And it was a pretty intense scene, actually. The kid actor was very, very good, actually. And it was kind of like your introduction to Angel, and then you see him, I mean, maybe 10 minutes in the whole movie. Like, he was barely there. And it had such a good start to it. So that was unfortunate. You had a side plot where Rogue was getting jealous because Bobby Iceman was, like, being able to contact with Kitty Pryde, and she was getting kind of inner feelings about it. And so that brings about the big, big, big situation in this movie is they have developed a cure quote unquote, for the mutant X gene, a way to suppress it permanently from another mutant called Leech, whose ability is he takes away other mutants' powers. And so instead of having like the division line like the first two movies did and how it was a lot about prejudice against mutants, now it's like you're kind of delving into, how do mutants feel about being able to take their powers away? Should you have to, or should you want to? And there's a lot of really great discussions about that throughout the movie. One with Beast and Storm, when they first find out, Professor X is kind of finding out through Beast. And Beast says to Storm, not everybody can fit in so easily. You don't shed on the furniture. And I thought it was a really great line. And he said, is it cowardice to save oneself from persecution? And so they make some very intelligent arguments about like the pros and cons of this. And clearly, if you were in that situation, it would be divisive, even within certain specific groups like the X-Men themselves. Storm really was offended by the idea. Rogue was really intrigued by the idea because she can't touch anybody. So I thought that there were moments in this movie that were done very well, that being one of them. Unfortunately, they didn't go much deeper than that. I would have loved to have seen them go much deeper than that. But they traded a lot of story and character development for just big action scenes. And this movie did deliver on that account. All of this cure manufacturing was being done at Alcatraz. And so to get there, Magneto had to literally lift the Golden Gate Bridge, turn it, and drop it down from the mainland to the island. And I thought that was spectacular. It truly was visually stunning. You're not used to seeing stuff like that in movies, and I thought that was absolutely cool. Other very, very good sequences in this movie where the government had caught Mystique and they put her in a mobile prison. And then Magneto finds her, and then there were like maybe 10 cars in this convoy that were hauling her, and he just demolishes all the cars, rips a semi-trailer off the rig, flips the rig over his head. I mean, it was very cool to see. And then, of course, the very end, There were a lot of really good action scenes there. Um, Beast, you get to see him for the first time, like really be Beast, like just going off, going ham on people. It was really cool to see, man. And I gotta say, they really killed it with Beast. Kelsey Grammer brought an intelligence to this character you want and you need for a character like this, because Beast is super intelligent. But then they had the other aspect of it, which is they really made him look like something to be afraid of in a fight. So I really thought that it was great. Things that I didn't like. Juggernaut. Vinnie Jones, I like Vinnie Jones. He's had some really cool roles. This was not one of them. It was just very poorly done. Nothing about Juggernaut in this movie really grabbed my attention. Juggernaut's one of the biggest villains in the X-Men series, and they just made him cheeseball in this. Another thing that I really didn't like is Magneto has been a very thoughtful, strategic guy throughout this series so far. And he's really been reduced to not much. There was not much development here. I mean, thankfully we have the first two movies to go by, but he was just a lot of one-liners in this movie, and that was kind of sad to see because Ian McKellen is a great actor. A couple of big deaths here did not matter. Professor X was trying to subdue the Phoenix, try to keep it at bay, try to get Jean Grey to think about what she's doing. The Phoenix resented Professor X and kind of hated him. And so there was this big scene where the Phoenix winds up killing the professor, and then at the end of the movie, in a cutscene, you find out that he's not really dead at all. He just projected his consciousness into his twin brother. Very cheap. Gotta say, very, very cheap. I did not like that. If you're gonna have casualties, have fucking casualties. Toward the end of the movie, they had to figure out how to beat Magneto. And so Logan jumps at him from one end, Beast comes up behind and stabs him with his cure. So he's supposed to lose his powers, and then at the very end of the movie, you see him getting his powers back. You see him move a piece of metal. Again, if you're going to do something, if there are consequences or casualties, keep them. Otherwise, you're just like wasting everybody's time, to be very honest. It did have a lot of problems. It did feel disjointed. There wasn't a very cohesive story there. That was another issue with this movie. And again, I have to feel like it was because it was so rushed and there was so much to this movie and it was such a big scale that unfortunately at some point something is bound to be left on the scrap floor, and it looks like a lot of the script is probably what it was. So that's kind of my take on the pros and cons of X-Men Last Stand. I did enjoy it, and I think there are definitely some wow moments there, and I think there were some very good character moments there. I think there were some things that didn't make sense, like the end finale, you know, Logan going up and being able to kill Jean at all. You know, they kind of give you an impression that maybe she wants to die, but when she's going through this rage moment and just tearing everything to hell, it doesn't really make sense that she's going to be like suicidal at that time. You know, it doesn't really make sense at all. So the fact that Logan even got anywhere near her, I don't know, man. So yeah, it definitely had its good and its bad. Not very well thought out, disjointed, but had some amazing scenes. And there were, you know, honestly, James Marsden at the beginning there, I really loved him. And it sucks that he was such a small part of this movie because it was damn good. So ladies and gentlemen, overall, I'm going to give this a halfway. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. Mainly because I do kind of take into account that it was rushed. There were obvious problems that I mentioned and obvious things in its favor that I mentioned. So I feel very middle of the road with this. It's something that I still watch from time to time. So it's not completely terrible, obviously, for me. So let me know what you guys think about it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, hit the like button, subscribe, and share. My name is Kevin Jackowitz, Kaged Nation, out.